Welcome to Our Nation Today. I'm K.R. Davidson. Thanks for joining us as we look at the stories behind the headlines. Mary Simon was sworn in on Monday as Canada's 30th Governor-General and became Canada's first Inuk Governor-General. The historic appointment was preceded by a customary meeting with the Queen, and the ceremony was rather understated due to public health restrictions.
I am honored, humbled, and ready to be Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General. We have learned as a country that we need to learn the real history of Canada. Embracing this truth makes us stronger as a nation, unites Canadian society, and teaches our kids that we must always do our best, especially when it is hard.
The appointment by the Prime Minister has been questioned as Ms. Simon does not speak French fluently, and after receiving over 600 complaints, the Official Languages Commissioner has launched a probe into the Governor's General selection. So it's always an exciting time when we see the appointment and the swearing in of the Governor-General, and Mary Simon seems to be well-credentialed and have great experience at this time to be representing that role on behalf of the head of state or Queen. And so obviously, it was somewhat challenged as a result of some issues that are arising as a result of her not being bilingual in both English and French. So give me some of your thoughts on this. Where do you stand? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I like where you started with that and saying this discussion has nothing to do with her credentials or ability as a Governor-General. It really has to do with the choice that was made by the government in appointing her, right?
Yeah,
or suggesting her
ultimately
to the Queen, right?
The Prime Minister does the selection. So I think when people are taking a look at it, they're questioning, was this the right appointment based on certain considerations and customs? This
is exactly right. And so I think one of the things that's really important is looking at why we are bilingual in the first place as a country. What are some of those tensions between our French-speaking population and our English-speaking population? And how would you feel as a French-speaking Canadian if the person that's now chosen to represent you as official head of state, how would you feel if they couldn't communicate with you in your language?
Well, and I think a lot of people are saying this. They're saying, what happens if Mary Simon only spoke French and an Indigenous language? Would that be acceptable to English Canadians?
We'd have even more outcry.
And you wonder where that would stand. However, she's not the first Governor-General to not be fluent in French. We had Ray Natishin and we had Schreier. They were both appointed, one under Pierre Trudeau, one under Brian Mulroney. And so, sometimes we have to take a look at, well, why is there more emphasis on it now than it was then?
Yeah, well, I think we live in a different social and political climate than back then. I think we have to look all the time and not be applying where we are at now back on those times, right? So what were things looking like then versus now? Access to information, mass communication, that kind of thing. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, getting 600 complaints, into the Official Languages Commissioner is a byproduct of where we're at in social media and how everybody can interact. And we're also taking a look at, in 1978, when Pierre Trudeau appointed Ed Schreier, we're actually taking a look at that was just the birth of the Official Languages Commissioner, and that was as a strike for unity. So when we take a look at this and we take a look at the Prime Minister's appointment, I think the biggest question is Justin Trudeau holding to the same tenets as his father in making sure that there's the unification between English and French language speaking Canadians?
And I think, too, Canadians rely on some of the structures, the laws, the different decisions and agreements that have been made for a sense of security, for a sense of an anchor point. So if we start throwing those out the window, what does that actually mean for Canadians in terms of knowing that they have a cornerstone, an anchor point, a place that they can trust?
Exactly. And now you've gone into my favorite Netflix series, The Crown, and you start to see these customs and these traditions actually have some importance, and that there's institutions that should not be destabilized. And I think the biggest thing is, could you deal with the important appointment of an Indigenous Governor-General and yet still maintain the bilingualism?
Absolutely. I think that's an incredibly important thing to look at.
Symbolic statements are important, and the Prime Minister's appointment of Mary Simon is an important step for improving relations with Indigenous peoples. However, the selection of a Governor-General that cannot currently serve Canadians in French is also a statement, and maintaining the delicate relationship between English and French-speaking Canadians does not need to come at the expense of improving Indigenous relations. While no one doubts that Ms. Simon will be a great Governor-General, the Prime Minister's selection is questionable, as the continued unity of the country should be a paramount consideration for any Prime Minister. Stay with us. When we return, we'll be looking at a new survey on long-term care in Canada. Welcome back to Our Nation Today. A survey from the Angus Reid Institute found more than 80% of respondents said their views on long-term care in Canada has changed since COVID-19. About half of those surveyed said they now dread the thought of themselves or their loved ones being in long-term care. Most think a complete overhaul is necessary, with the majority of Canadians stating a clear preference for remaining in their homes and receiving in-home care. Long-term care residents account for approximately 2/3 of the fatal coronaviruses in Canada, and Canada had the worst record for COVID-19 deaths amongst the elderly compared with wealthy countries. So these are pretty telling stats, the latter with respect to the fatalities as a result of COVID-19. And I don't think anybody's surprised with the Angus Reid poll, which says nobody ever wants to end up in a long-term care home or in a private retirement home. So, what are some of your thoughts on this? Obviously, there's going to be an overhaul on long-term care. The question is, what does that look like?
Absolutely. Well, I think to me, I kind of go back to what's happened over the last 100 years. Where have we been in terms of maybe families living in more multi-generational contexts and settings, moving into both parents, both partners going out to work? What did that mean for childcare and for elderly care?
Sure.
Right? And then moving into, now, how do we maybe, where people are interested, how do we maybe bring some support to people that want to stay in their homes, whether it's their own children taking care of them or someone else?
Yeah, and the survey is saying that most people prefer to have in-home care. And if you're taking a look at the poster child for long-term care or for care scenarios for elderly, it appears to be Denmark. And Denmark allocates a significant amount, 64% of their budget, to a concept called community care, which would either allow for in-home care or much smaller settings where you're actually seeing the government not be the paramount provider.
Yeah, and you see a ton of advantages with this. I mean, if you compare this to essentially, especially in a public care setting where essentially it's beds in a hospital kind of idea, instead of someone still having the dignity of a home, you compare that to someone being able to come to your house to provide you some of your care or to maybe relieve your family members that are caring for you. I mean, there's a really big difference there in quality of life. And we're always talking about quality of life, right?
Yeah, I think some of your points are really valid here because we're taking a look at a lot of cries to say we need more staffing and we need to spend more so we get higher quality staffing. But I think sometimes we're just reinvesting in a broken model. The question is, how do the best care is always going to be provided by the family up until the time that they can't care anymore. But even more so, we see Denmark's able to bring in those people to be able to supplement and to be able to assist.
Well, if you want to even talk about, we look at real estate market and how, we can talk about housing crises and all these kind of things. If we don't have to take up so much real estate with these big buildings and we can actually have people stay in their homes longer with these kind of assistances and care, we even avoid some of those problems.
Yeah, and you take a look, when you get this big building model, you actually get this concept called beds. And it's almost like you're checking out. And it's like, I actually like Norway's model because it talks about this ableism within the elderly.
Re-ablement.
Yeah, fantastic. Where, I know this sounds harsh, but, they won't open the door for an elderly person if that elderly person can still do it. And I think that there are things where we take a look that we need to be able to invest in our elderly as much as we invest in our young and not discard the investment that they gave to us.
Well, to me, it's a whole nother level of dignity, right?
Yeah.
Like when you start saying, you know what, forget it, you sit in the bed, I'm gonna take care of this, this, and this, because nurses and different PSWs, people that are taking care of these people, they're so overloaded, they don't have the time. They just got to get through their rounds and do their things. And so being able to say, yeah, you can participate in still living your life. You can still participate in buying your groceries or doing whatever. The level of dignity there is huge.
So when we're taking a look at it, governments are taking a look at, there's this big mandate. They're looking at shifting long-term care under ministries of health. But then you've got this other issue that's arising. You see the UK actually has a ministry of loneliness. So we've got these competing issues that are in play. One's going to be driving up the health budget even more. And then this other part where, we keep on focusing on individualism, and it doesn't seem to be
right.
working
But does
out.
it have to drive the health budget up that much if we actually reallocate some of these resources and we actually make a change and we look to use some of these in different ways? Because people are staying in homes, they're not going to be in public or private homes, and we can maybe reallocate those in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
To support
And you
them.
can actually take a look at those that are up and coming as seniors actually will be able to participate in that care. Mahatma Gandhi stated that a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. As Canada ranks as one of the best countries in the world to live, it is evident that our elderly are not enjoying the benefits of their previous investments, and change is now imminent and necessary. The only question is whether we continue to invest in a model that has proven to produce unenviable results, or whether we transform the system to allow for life to be lived to the fullest till our departure from this place. Stay with us. When we return, we'll be looking at how some airports in the U.S. are running out of fuel. American and Delta Airlines and others are asking pilots to take steps to save fuel as several small to mid-sized airports are reporting low fuel levels. The shortage is attributed to a variety of causes, including a labor shortage of fuel tanker drivers in the wake of the pandemic. Supply chains continue to be affected by COVID-19, and companies ranging from car manufacturers to shoe manufacturers are seeing disruptions in their supply chains, which, in light of the most recent shutdowns, is causing many to reconsider the stability of these supply chains. Okay, so interesting topic in and of itself. Yeah, airports have these huge reserves, so it's sort of odd to see that they're running out of fuel. They're able to accommodate and change that, but it's giving this larger question of, why is this happening? And obviously it's affecting other areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to look at how much production of various things that we rely on every day has been sent offshore, how much we rely on trade with different countries. And I think the bigger part of the bigger question is really our relationship with China and how that's affecting so much of what we eat or what we buy, use every single day.
Okay, so
Let's just jump in.
So we'll start out. We'll take a look. Why are the airlines seeing this fuel shortage? They're saying that there's some labor issues, but they're also saying that during COVID they reallocated production over to other fuels, so the airlines weren't there. They're seeing a boom in uptake in travel and such. But I think you're hitting on this important point when we're taking a look at what do we have to do, even from a national security interest, to be able to control our supply chains? And are some of the investments that we're taking a look at Canada going to be able to be partnered with countries like China?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at the things that we rely on every day in terms of, creating processing chips, for instance, or just the other things that we need to manufacture our cars, PPE, right?
Yeah.
Even vaccines, right? All these things that we rely on products from other places to be produced other places. It's a national security concern, and it's also it's a sovereignty concern, I think, in the end.
Well, and I actually think that we're seeing this shifting happening in international relations, where it's not about what you can control from a territorial aspect, but information and parts of this supply chain. So you're taking a look at China. China has a lot of the rare earth metals, and if they shut off that tap, a lot of our green technologies and that start to falter. And we take a look, we see microchips aren't even being able to supply. We're seeing car lines being shut down because
it's interesting because it almost takes you way back thousands of years to a walled city where all you had to do as an aggressor was to come and surround it and stop trade from coming in and out. It's almost that same idea, just in a 21st century context where if we can have our own resources inside of our own country, we're not as much at their.
Okay, so we've got this Adam Smith model, which says here, you should be able to take advantage of whoever can produce it to the greatest cost efficiency. But there's other factors that have to come into play in this cost measurement. And so Tony Clement, our host of Boom and Bust, with Sandra Pupatella and such, has talked about this issue of reshoring. And so tell us what this concept is.
Absolutely. They started an organization actually to start promoting this and start doing the hard research into stuff that will help the government and businesses. But it's the idea of bringing back things that are no longer produced in Canada or that we just immediately outsource. And so the idea of bringing the production back here so we can have more reliable sources.
Okay, and I think in certain areas, I think in some areas...
where it makes sense. I mean, of course, everything has to be done with, a level of understanding, right?
Well, and specifically, we're taking a look at, the Trump administration started to have more nationalistic tendencies, of course, and specifically in the area of manufacturing. And so when we're taking a look, Canada hasn't been doing well. Our GDP in manufacturing has dropped quite significantly over the last couple of decades. And there has to be a real emphasis to be able to try to restart that. And I think in areas like mining or green technologies, there would be a real emphasis to be able to say,
we're sitting on
that?
so many natural resources. And I think, I don't know, sometimes there's this idea that, if we take them, if we deplete them here, they'll be gone forever. And they're being depleted somewhere in the world, right? And so being able to actually use the resources we have in a safe way and in a responsible way, that's something we get to control.
COVID-19 continues to be a magnifying glass that is either allowing us to see vulnerabilities that pre-existed, and in some instances, it is sparking a fire to make changes to ensure that we discontinue practices that no longer serve their intended purposes. This comes amid growing hostility between China and the West, where our former partner has become more of a strategic rival. And if Canada is seeking to be a leader of green technologies, we will have to ensure control of our supply chains. Canada needs to take steps to identify those areas that should be reshored and to encourage innovation and repatriation where it is prudent to do so. Stay with us. When we return, we'll be looking at the continuing dilemma associated with the U.S.'s withdrawal from Afghanistan. Welcome back to Our Nation Today. The Pakistani military says dozens of Afghan security forces have fled their attackers and slipped across the border into northwest Pakistan after their security post was overrun, apparently by the Taliban. The Taliban have swiftly captured territory in recent weeks in Afghanistan and have seized strategic border crossings with several neighboring countries. This is all in the midst of Russia, China, and others seeking to exert influence over the country as the U.S. finalizes their withdrawal. Okay, so we've spoken about this issue recently. Obviously, great concern, specifically for Canada, as we're seeing the withdrawal of U.S. troops, marking the longest ever mission for U.S. And of course, Canada had a vested interest here. But I think that this sparks a bigger question. If the U.S. is pulling out, and we're starting to see the influence of China aligning with Pakistan, et cetera, to exert regional influence, where does the U.S. and Canada stand with respect to international relations in this new sphere of geopolitics?
Yeah, I think one big part of it is looking at, it used to be that the might of the United States or of the West, could kind of do what they want, take what they wanted, control what they wanted, help where they wanted. And I think we see from this, after 20 years, we're still essentially in the same place if you look at, what Taliban had control of before and at this time. And so I think you have to re-examine that. We have to ask, how do we partner in the future with countries? What does that look like?
Well, I think you're right. I think there was a lot of energy that was invested in Iraq, and you're starting to take a look that there just can't be this continued might. So then, and you take a look at China. We've got the Belt and Road Initiative. You know that they're going to make inroads into Afghanistan, and there's rare earth metals there. They've got their eyes on that. Strange bedfellows, China and Pakistan, obviously, is giving rise for concern in India. But the question is, like, how does Canada play here when you're talking about what does it mean to be for Canada or the U.S. to invest in other countries in a different way? What do you see in that regard?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in this particular case, there may have been other things, behind some of the U.S.'s involvement. We don't, not everything's out in the light in terms of what that was. But I think in future, there's definitely going to have to be agreement between the most broad governing bodies of those countries and wherever we choose to interact, so that there can be some partnership.
Yeah, okay, so it's interesting because President Biden said, we weren't in Afghanistan to deal with
nation building.
Nation
we
building.
weren't there for nation
like,
building.
Okay, we were there,
well, we were there
for
2
years.
decades. Exactly.
Okay, so but in all sincerity, the reality is if there's a country that is seeking the assistance of either Canada, the U.S., or other Western allies, there has to be some sort of synergy between
Absolutely.
the objectives of that government and what we hold and value to be true in order for there to be some sort of growth and development.
And so I think in that case, then you have more of a partnership model than a paternalistic model. It's less about coming in and saying, we know what's right, to do it our way or the highway. I think a little bit more of a unified joint effort to say, what is your culture like? What's going on here? How can we best help?
Well, and when I take a look at it with China, you have the Belt and Road Initiative that's coming in, and we're investing, copious amounts of money. But when you have, we've seen this, when you have regimes that don't have the same level of governance as us, that money largely escapes the country and doesn't go into those investments. And so when we're taking a look at where does Canada invest going forward, we have to take a look at is this country the type of country that can be subjected to concepts like the rule of law and this notion where corruption in the highest levels is something that we weigh before we invest into.
Yeah, I mean, it's like making a business decision about who you're going to partner with. I mean, you have to consider all those different things. What's the character of this other person I'm looking to partner with? How are they going to take... So go ahead.
No. But on that note, I think you raised a good question. Like, we can't just treat international relations like our business relationships. But on that point, a business doesn't try to be all things to all people. It says here, this is where we can play well. This is what we can see by way of an investment in what we're able to do, and then they're able to see the fruit from that investment afterwards.
There's partnerships you seek, and there's partnerships you just walk away from. It could look like a good deal, but you know it's not for you.
Well, and we'll have more to talk on that. That's for sure. Geopolitics is just not what it used to be. In a world seeking certainty, the subject of international relations is shifting from a period of U.S. dominance and multilateral institutions to a quest for dominance regionally with a demand for new norms, institutions, and partnerships. Canada will have to continue to assess and identify how it fits into this shifting landscape, with an eye to investing abroad in fertile ground that embraces and is ready to incorporate reforms that are aligned with our outlook on governance and our priorities as a society. Both Rachel and I would like to thank you for watching Our Nation today. And remember, keep examining and know that you are part of the solution.